This is the Turf Zone Podcast, your central information and news hub, bringing together professionals from turf associations across multiple states to share things to help you in your business. Brought to you in partnership with our friends at the Maryland Turfgrass Council. This episode is sponsored in part by Sod, world-class service on demand. Visit us online at www.buysod.com. Now, let's get in the zone.
Welcome to the Turf Zone. In this episode of Maryland Turfgrass, we're talking to Logan Freeman, MTC board member and golf course superintendent at Mountain Branch Golf Club in Joppa, Maryland. Logan, thanks for joining me.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
All right, so let's start at the beginning and get a little background on you. How did you decide to pursue a career in turfgrass management?
I just kind of stumbled into it in high school, senior year of high school. My dad brought home an application for a local country club in Boise, Idaho, where I used to live. And he's like, here's an opportunity for a summer job. And I thought, okay, yeah, I'll check it out or whatever. So I filled the application out, went down and did it, and ended up with a summer job where I started just a couple weeks after graduating high school, way back in '99, and I enjoyed it. All I did was rake bunkers the first year, pretty much, and do detail work. But it just kind of kept in the back of my mind something that I was enjoying, even though I think I honestly tried to get out of it like 3 or 4 different times in the first 2 years that I worked. But I ended up sticking it out and kept coming back. And honestly, through college, I was thinking I was going a different direction. I was going to get into emergency response. That was kind of where I thought I was going to go. But lo and behold, 20 some years later and still in the golf business and haven't left.
So you never dabbled in other areas of turfgrass management? No sports fields or lawn and landscape?
For about 3 months, I helped a friend of mine start his lawn care business, and I was his residential irrigation tech. I did that, and then at the club I had worked at for several years before, the assistant superintendent position came open, and I just thought I would go talk with the superintendent at the time about it to see, he had been my boss before when I'd left, and just to ask him if he thought I was qualified for the position and if I'd be a good fit. And he said, of course. And that's how I ended up really getting back into it. And at that point, I think I had finally decided that it would be a career, potentially a path that I was looking to follow. And I was an assistant at that club for several years. And then when I left there, I moved out to Maryland in 2010 and came out here and didn't have a job. I followed some family at the time and came out and was able to stumble into an assistant position at Mountain Branch that came open. And so I took that, and then that position led me into, like 5-6 months later into the superintendent position when it became available. Lately, I have started doing some side job stuff myself. I'd always done, families and, that sort of stuff, helping out lawn care wise. But lately, I have started my own side business where I do some fertilizer applications and aerification mainly and stuff like that. I don't do mowing and things, but that business has just kind of been some added extra income where I'm able to use my skill set and actually develop that to be a pretty nice little business. So I understand both sides, but I've never done sports turf. I love what sports turf people do and how they do it, and it's fascinating, and I enjoy how the lawn care companies work and other golf superintendents, and it's part of what I enjoy in the business is just learning from everybody possible.
That's great. So that brings me to your involvement in Maryland Turfgrass Council. How did you decide to get involved in that role as a board member? And what do you think is most important about being a part of a membership like that?
I was looking, since I moved out here, I've been a member of the MidAtlantic Golf Course Superintendents, and MAGS is just an awesome group, and I've really enjoyed supporting them and going to their functions and all that. And then I was kind of like, well, it's time for me to start to give back, and how do I want to do it? And to be honest, for me and how I feel with wanting to support all sectors of turf grass, I started looking into the MTC, and I was like, that's possibly a perfect fit for me, where they're going to support golf and sports turf and lawn care and sod growers, and maybe I'll just reach out. And I went to the fall conference that they offer, and there was that announcement made that they were looking for possible board members, and I was like, hey, what the heck? So I went to President Ben Ellis and talked to him for just a little bit, and said, hey, I'm interested if you're looking for people to fill board positions. And then I talked to some other people in the industry about it, and they recommended that, yeah, I go at it. And before I even knew I was on the board, I was asking other people questions of, if I got on the board, what are things you'd like to see different, or areas that we need to address. And that's how I kind of, came into the position, and it's been great. And then, of course, the situation with COVID comes in, and it's kind of made it a challenge, but it's really a great group of people that are supporting turfgrass industry as a whole, which is, I think, where I fit in best.
That's great. And you've had an article that has got a lot of great traction, and we've seen it in several magazines about cooperation among segments of the turfgrass industry. What first turned you onto that specific need? I know that you mentioned in the article visiting a regional STMA chapter and seeing that you were the only golf course superintendent there. How did that ball get rolling and get so much momentum for you?
That I did. I was invited by a good friend of mine, a salesman friend of mine, Scott Orndorff from Landscape Supply. They were a sponsor and of that event, and he said that the STMA is looking to form a Mid-Atlantic chapter, and it had been around at one point, but it kind of dissolved, and they were looking to get some more traction and start over. And he said, hey, we're going to have some speakers and stuff there, and maybe you'd like to meet some different people. And I jumped on the opportunity, and to be honest, when I went there, I stayed stood in the back, and kind of just observed. And the only people I recognized were the salesmen. Was like, oh, that's kind of interesting, but I didn't really know anybody else. And then I ended up kind of just, it was at Camden Yards. So Nicole Sherry ends up coming in, and she's kind of standing in the back also. And I just kind of started chatting with her just a little bit, just to kind of, see what she was thinking. And then after the meeting, we went out and had a social afterwards, and we ended up spending, hours together with this little group of us. And I just realized, these people are great. They're, first of all, they're a lot of fun, and they're very smart, and they're doing something that I think I can learn from. And at the time, I was very interested in the fact that they're just so detail oriented. I mean, we're detail oriented in golf. Also, golf's very technical, but there's a different level of detail in say, a Major League Baseball field management. And so I was, in golf, I'm like, oh, they're managing, 2 acres of turf. First, that's got to be easy, kind of that sort of mentality, which I think is common. And then once I got into it, I'm like, wow, there is a lot going into this. And let's face it, the pressure of having multi-million-dollar athletes playing on the surface you're managing is very high. And I respect that, and I found that extremely interesting, and I wanted to learn more. So after the event, a couple days go by, and I just randomly emailed Nicole, and said, "Hey, I'd love to learn some more. Come down and visit." And she just like right away, responded back, said, "You bet. I'd love to have you come down and take a tour." And that's how it started. I went down. We had a tour. We had great conversation, and I learned a lot from her, and she wanted to learn from me and what we do, and that's how it really took off. When I got home, I thought, why was I the only superintendent at this group supporting these people? Why aren't we working together on topics that we both would benefit from, and we could learn from each other? And so that's really how the article started. I just started brainstorming and sat down at the computer typing one day, and it really just flowed out the things that I've witnessed, the separation. I didn't understand why we have it, and we could really just benefit if we came together. I mean, let's face it, that the legislative aspect of turfgrass has gotten very strict over the years, and I don't think anybody thinks that's going away. It's only going to get tougher, and sometimes that those movements or that legislation is really kind of brought out quickly and maybe misinformed or targeted to something that is very important to us as a industry. And so I thought, if we're all sitting on our own trying to battle these independently, we're going to get run over, and we need to fight for our industry because we're all professionals and we're educated professionals, and that's important that we convey that. So that's where I reached out to Nicole, and I was like, is this important if I wrote an article about this? I've been starting this. And she said, absolutely, 100%. That article would be great. We feel the same way. So go ahead, and you can use me in it if you want, and let's see what happens with it. And so I wrote it and I sent it to her for review, and she was 100% on board with everything. And I talked to some salesmen and a couple lawn care friends of mine, and everyone was on the same page. And I found that very interesting. We've been separated, yet everyone really wanted this information and wants to work together. So it's a matter of us actually moving forward and doing this and taking the steps. And that's where I've taken it with the article. And then it's really gone great from there.
Absolutely. And I think that kind of parlayed over into, you spoke at the MidAtlantic Turfgrass Expo or MidAtlantic Turf Expo. And I think at the request of Mike Goatley, is that right?
That's correct.
So in thinking about how the industry can come together and help each other out among the segments, I know that you mentioned legislation has been a really tough topic in the last couple of years for sure, but also now with COVID-19 restrictions and essential jobs and essential services. And I know that you guys got a nice surprise there in Maryland with a notification on one day. Was it in the late afternoon that you could open the next day? Am I remembering that right?
Yeah, it was. We all huddled by the TV or the radio, to listen to Governor Hogan speak, and it was 3 o'clock, and we were all kind of wondering what was going to happen. And 3:15, he announces he's going to, kind of move to stage one, and this will allow golf courses to open as of 7 a.m. tomorrow. So the next day, 7 a.m., and pretty soon my phone is blowing up from the general manager and the owner contacting me, the other superintendents, and so it was a mad scramble to some degree. The vast majority of us had done things like pulling all the tee markers off and removing the flag and the cups and that sort of stuff. And we had all kind of thought we'd have at least a couple days or a day. I fully expected him to be saying, on a Wednesday that, hey, you can open Friday morning. That's kind of what I expected. So when it was such short notice, it was a little bit of a crazy panic, but at the same time, it was a good panic. We'd all been kind of working together and knowing if it happened, when we reopen, what's going to be our game plan. So we already kind of had that together. It was just a matter of maybe putting the golf course back together for play. And then the short notice was difficult. I think, I had a small staff, obviously, like most people at that time, but the pro shop was like, all of a sudden we need to call people that are either on unemployment or are just retired and are taking the time off, that like, we need some help tomorrow. So it was a little bit of an abrupt, change there, but everybody was able to work together, and it turned out fantastic. Actually, the phone, when I was talking to the GM 15 minutes after the governor had made the announcement, the phone was ringing in the background with people making tea times. Everyone was just bursting at the seams to get out. And we've been extremely busy since then. It had slowed down a little bit this week, cooler weather and whatnot, but up to this point, it really showed that there is a demand for golf, and that there is a demand for people to be out. And that's beneficial. All the people I talk to, have been saying they're busy, 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 and it's awesome that people are coming out and supporting golf, because during the shutdown, not all of our adjoining states shut down, and that was put some pressure on Maryland golf, in my opinion. Not everyone was adhering to the don't cross the state line things, and some other states were kind of benefiting from Maryland being shut down. So that was tough, but it was glad that once we opened back up, people were really here to support us and to come back out, and it's been good. I'm not going to lie, the first day or two I was like driving the cart out in fairways without even looking, because I was just used to nobody being around, and people would like look at me like, hello. I'm like, oh, sorry, gotta get it back into actual, golf operations without trying to get beamed by golf balls or drive past people. So that took a little bit of getting used to, but my staff, like, the whole thing, just from the moment we shut down. So we aerified our greens on a Monday, and Tuesday they shut us down. So we got all of our greens aerified, and then I had to let the vast majority of my staff go, and just go to like a skeleton crew of me, my assistant, and I had a couple guys that would work maybe 2 days a week, just come in and help us get things mowed. But the staff would text me and say, hey, how are you guys doing? Is there anything I can do? I don't need to be paid. Can I just come help or whatever, and so that was awesome. And I thank them for that. And the members as well were reaching out, if there's something that needed to be done. And we were able to manage quite well. Obviously, we did all the practices that most superintendents did. We heavy on growth regulators. We pulled all spring, fertilizing, just doing everything we could to not promote any growth. And I think normally I'm not in, Mother Nature is an enemy sometimes, but the spring has been cool. It was wet for a little bit, but then it dried out. But the coolness of it really just kind of kept everything in check, allowed us to get through mowing things. I got to give big thanks and support to all the different agencies, whether it be the MidAtlantic golf course superintendents, to the GCSA with all their recommendations for minimal maintenance and the support that everyone was giving to try and get Maryland and other golf back open as soon as possible, and supporting that. It really showed that there is a big support a group out there, and that's kind of where I am with the article, and what I talked to everybody about is, and when I went down and gave the speech down at the MATE conference for Dr. Goatley and those guys, was the idea just of supporting everyone. At that time, obviously, we didn't even know that this was coming up, but the importance was there, and this just showed it that much more. Who would have ever thought that golf itself would shut down in a vast number of states? So the more people we have to support in those sort of situations is great. It's beneficial. There's no real harm in everybody supporting everybody and working together, and that's what I am striving to do. That's where I hope that the MTC will continue to move towards. The conference that we have at the end of the year. that's an awesome conference because there's people from all groups, and you just get to see people you wouldn't normally see, and learn from them and topics from them, and that's just, I think, super important, because here's a perfect example of us all needing to support each other, and let's face it, the job in general, whether it's any sort of turf grass, Mother Nature beating on you constantly, it just seems like a lot of the times nothing goes right. It's important to have that mental support system as well. Somebody that you can just talk to, that understands exactly what you're going through. Because if you just talk to the general public or whatever, you say, I'm a golf course superintendent, they say, first of all, wow, so are you good at golf? Or you must play a lot of golf. And the truth is, as I've moved up the pole, the responsibility ladder, my rounds of golf have greatly gone down to where now I just play a few times a year. And that's usually at, our events that we're putting on or match play stuff. But in general, most people don't know what you do, what all goes into it. I mean, I've had people come out to the golf course and for outings, and you're talking to them, and they think that the grass is fake. It's like carpet, or whatever on the greens, and you tell them it's a living thing, and they're just like blown away. I'm like, trust me, it's living, because every year it dies. I'm just like, my whole thing is just to educate people and to share what we're doing. And here at this club, I got, good support from the ownership. We're doing things like I talk a little bit in the article with native areas. I don't call them native areas because to me, they're most, if they're native in Maryland, they're woods. We don't have a lot of native grassy areas per se. So I consider them to be low input, out of play areas. We've developed, I mean, this last spring during the, one nice thing about being shut down is it allowed us to grow in extra areas. Like we might have added 4 or 5 more acres of areas we're not mowing with rough. Therefore, we don't need to mow them, spend the fuel. We don't need to fertilize and do all that stuff. We're just, really minimizing them. And the only maintenance we're putting into them is like a fall or a winter mowing to chop things down to keep them from becoming major brushy things. Sometimes it's not the world's most beautiful, but what it is things that are, you know, promoting. Like I have milkweed. I didn't seed the milkweed in. It's just naturally had some small areas. It's spread. There's monarch butterflies all over. There's, a lot of wildlife enjoying these areas. And I think that's where golf is headed in the future. Lower input. Those restrictions are here to stay. The in the glory days of, you know, the the 90s, late 90s, early 2000s, when golf was an unbelievable boom and everybody had $1 million budget and it was just glorious. Those are gone. One thing that I think is an important point to make when people think golf courses are harmful to the environment or anything like that. It's, come out to the golf course, take a look, let's see what you're doing. Like, I might say in the article something to the effect of, it's hard to think you're toxic wasteland when there's butterflies everywhere and deer and we have everything here. There's snakes and mice and deer and butterflies and bees, and it's a full environmental thing here. And if we sprayed things that were dangerous to the environment, really bad, we wouldn't have those things. And it's important to convey that to everybody and to show that we're all professionals. No golf course survives these days by wasting money. We are down to a few thousand square feet when you're done spraying the tank. Like, it's only what we need when we need it. And some people just don't understand that. They might think we're wasting everything and damaging stuff. And that's where I'm kind of headed and wanted to educate. And I've reached out to some local, senators, and the senator that represents Hartford County, and JB Jennings. He's been out with me toward the golf course, has become a big supporter of this club and golf in general, and just to understand, the benefit we provide, and the I think after this COVID stuff, it showed the benefit emotionally to the community, to their well-being in general, so to speak, and their exercise, and the importance to the economy, I think, was showed when we reopened.
Absolutely. I love the focus on educating the public. I've learned over the past couple of years in my work with the turf community, people are very uneducated just about exactly what you guys do, and there, I think, are a lot of misperceptions. So I love your focus on bringing the industry together and educating those outside of turfgrass management. It's really, I think, important work, and I've hardly met anybody who has learned enough about it that maintains the negative attitude that you talked about. So, Logan, let's wrap up with one last question, and maybe this is going to be more of a summary of everything we've talked about. But what would your advice be for people entering the turfgrass industry right now?
For that, my advice, I've had some employees that have gone on to get a degree or something of that nature. My advice is diversify your skills. Don't think that you're just gonna be doing one thing. You're better off having a full understanding of golf, of turf in general. Yes, if you're going to be a golf course superintendent, there are specifics, but there are things in it that we deal with more on a day basis, like just the managing of people and the budget aspect, the environment, learning how to convey your position politely and educate people, and I think that develop right out of the gate a strong network of people to support you in all aspects of your life. Like, yes, we grow grass, but at the end of the day, we go home to family, and this job can go home with you. It does, especially once you go up. You don't stop thinking about the golf course. And what are you going to do tomorrow? What's the weather? Where are we at? I mean, right now we're almost headed into June, and so we're about to go into 90 days of very difficult managing conditions. But the way the weather's been changing, it's probably almost 120. I mean, it seems like all the way through September now is pretty difficult. But for the young people coming out, it's important to develop a full support system. And I recommend them reaching out to all the different sectors, reaching out to the organizations that they belong in. Don't just necessarily belong only to the GCSAA or the local chapter, or just the STMA in the local chapter. You can support both. Join the MTC, which is a great way to support all the different sectors. Reach out to professors that you have. Keep those relationships. Don't just stay at only talk to professors at Maryland. Reach out to Penn State and Rutgers, or it doesn't matter anywhere. Everyone has a different perspective that you can gain from, and I think it's important to remember to have some sort of grounding in not just the job, but also what you do outside of the job. And don't lose that, because it is very easy to become consumed by what we do. And I, was kind of there at some point, especially when I first took over this job, that, there were 16-hour days consecutive. I was in it, and I'm just like, all in all, the grass is going to be there tomorrow. And that's something that I've worked on educating, with my assistant, Eric, who's been with me for many years now. Started with this guy on the crew, but has been a long time assistant of mine now. And it's important of the home life and the getaway, calm down, shut down, try not to think about golf for just a little bit. And there's times on days off where be like, oh, I'll probably come up and do so. I'm like, no, just like do something other than the golf course. Like, stay away and decompress, so that when you're here, you're excited to be here, and you're ready to take on the day. And I also would recommend that young people, or any age people, doesn't matter if you're getting into this business, to find your niche in mentoring and helping people, whether they're your coworkers or you're part of that educating the public. As soon as you work here, you're part of spreading the word of what we actually do and learning exactly what we do and why. So that's what I think, is important. It's not just a superintendent's job or a head groundskeeper's job to educate. It's everybody. And that extends to how your parents or your siblings or your wife or anybody, your neighbor, thinks about this industry. It's important to teach the benefit of what we do, and that's where I take a mentor aspect, like you're mentoring the general public as well as people that are actually in the industry. And that's important to really drive home. And I think that the general day to day of the job will come with time and with understanding. But sharing the aspect, working with all the different sectors, I think is vital, and that takes time. You don't get that right out of college, but you should start back then.
That's great advice, Logan. Thanks so much again for taking the time to chat today.
You bet. Yeah, it's very good, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to share and for sharing the article. And I've gotten really good feedback on that, and it's an important thing to me, and I thank you for putting this on and for spreading the good word.
Absolutely. Don't miss an episode of Maryland Turfgrass. Subscribe at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
You've been listening to The Turf Zone. Thank you to our sponsors, including Buy Sod, world-class service on demand. Visit us online at www.buysod.com. For more episodes of The Turf Zone, visit theturfzone.com and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast app.